Today, Thursday, November 24, 2022, 30 Heshvan 5783. We are honored today to have our dear friend, Professor David Ben-Susan, our speaker, for multiple times. We never have enough of him to address us. Our topic today is archaeology in Jerusalem. Our program was created by Rabbi Shahar Orenstein in 2009, following a year of study for adult bat mitzvah, celebrated on July 5, 2009. Our next Wednesday session will be musical with our Reverend Daniel Ben Lolo. Topic, water, bread, and music. Will be very nice as usual. I would like to invite Sandra Kuku to read for us a short biography of our Professor David Ben-Susan from Orlando, Florida. Thanks to the new technology that brings us all together. We are having here today from dear friends from all over the world. Thank you for joining. I would like to congratulate Sandra Kuku again for her new grandson. We watched the bridge on Zoom. Sandra Kuku, bevakasha bechavod.
Thank you, Gladys. Dr. David Ben-Susan of Quebec holds a PhD in electrical engineering from McGill University. He has been a professor in the Department of Electrical Engineering at the École de Technologie Supérieure de l'Université du Québec since 1980. Dr. Ben-Susan has served as president of the Communauté Séfarade Unifiée du Québec and has been involved in philanthropic and community organizations for many years. He has also served as a member of the Cross-Cultural Roundtable on Security of Canada and of the Selection Advisory Board at Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada. He has published extensively in the telecommunications and energy fields and has filed a large number of patents. He has also written a number of literary works, including a Bible commentary, the Bible in the Cradle, a book of souvenirs, The Son of Mogador, a historical novel, King Solomon's Riddle, a historical essay, Spain of the Three Religions, Once Upon a Time in Morocco, and an art book, A Jewish Wedding in Mogador, in collaboration with Asher Knafel. His other accomplishments include receiving a fellowship from the Matsume International Foundation in Japan in 1988, the literary prize Chaim Zafrani from the Elie Wiesel Institute in Paris, and the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Award. That's our speaker today.
That's nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay,
I would like to invite now Dr. David Ben-Susan to show us his beautiful presentation. Dr. David Ben-Susan, bevakasha bechavod.
Bevakasha. I'm trying to share my screen. 1 second. Share here. Can you see?
Yes.
Yes. So hello, everybody. So it's always a pleasure to find familiar faces. And today we're going to cover a topic which is absolutely infinite. Just remind you that Yigal Yadin, which is a top archaeologist in his time, said that to dig to Jerusalem, to get to the bottom of Jerusalem, you need to dig for 500 years. It just tells you how rich is the place. As usual, I'm going to ask you not to put this lecture on the website. There's 3 or 4 pictures. I'm not sure I have the permission to show them. So that's why you can transmit it with our personal notes and not the note for public distribution in a regular website. So take this into consideration, just like we did last time. How to approach the topic? It is so vast. So I decided to present a history of archaeology through the archaeologists, and like that, we try to discover the late 2 centuries of discoveries amongst the diggings of Jerusalem. Or what is archaeology? In archaeology, simply you're trying to take your towel, you brushes, you spoons, you dig, and you try simply to rebuild the past from the artifacts. You take the objects, you classify them, you label them, you have a big database, and you try to confirm history. Now, history is a different story. History usually is based on documents. So history is somehow, they say that the history depends on the historian. That means many archaeological findings confirm history, some don't. So we have to be aware that of that aspect. And somehow archaeology and history complete each other. Most of the time they confirm each other, sometimes they don't.
I'm okay.
Okay.
I'm listening.
Now,
Oh, bonjour, ma minette.
well, when we speak of Jerusalem and Old Jerusalem, we have to make a difference between Jerusalem and the city of David. The city of David is simply this mount that you see here. This is what we call the original Jerusalem, city of David, and this is the Temple Mount. Okay. Now, Jerusalem, as you know, was considered to be the center of the world by many, many monotheistic religions. And therefore, when you go into Jerusalem, you're going to see a notion of churches, of mosques, of synagogues that went there for centuries. And finding its way among this puzzle is not easy as such, but let's continue. My first part will go until from the beginnings until the Roman times. That means until the destruction of the Second Temple. Historically, we had Hittites and Egyptians were the 2 superpowers, and followed by the Assyrian
Ksenia,
superpower.
you have to mute everyone.
I am. People are joining and they're not muted. Sorry.
Okay. So Assyrian was a superpower who, remember, destroyed the kingdom of Israel and scattered 10 tribes of the Hebrew people, followed by the Babylonian period, the Persian period, the Greek period, and the Roman period. So we're going to travel through those periods through our discoveries. Now, archaeology started basically in the 19th century. First, you had a few individuals, which we'll present. And they started to discover certain artifacts, and then suddenly the whole Europe and America and the whole world wanted to come and take part into the exploration of Jerusalem. You have, first of all, in 1865, the Palestine Exploration Fund, founded by Queen Victoria and Montefiore, and Moses Montefiore. Then you had l'École biblique et archéologique française de Jérusalem, founded by the Dominicans, followed by the American School of Oriental Research, and the British School of Archaeology in Jerusalem, and the Israeli Antiquities Authority since 1967. I'll present each of them separately. The first one in 1865 was the Palestine Exploration Fund. There was a lot of hope to discover some of the biblical past, Jewish and non-Jewish. L'École biblique archéologique française Jérusalem was founded in 1890, but it's still working today. It's a center for studies, scholars and non-scholars, and it is still working. Then you have the Albright Institute, the American School of Oriental Research, which is also still working. Albright is one of the top archaeologists of the 20th century, who made many discoveries. Among others, he deciphered the Old Hebrew writing and many other, Sumerian, Babylonian, Akkadian, and other writings. He was able to make sense of a lot of the past. Then you have the British School of Archaeology, which started basically with the British mandate of Palestine. And what we have is the Rockefeller Museum in 1938. And then you have the Israeli Antiquities Authority, who publishes hundreds of articles, books. And what you see here is a Museum of Israel, in which we can find a lot of artifacts. Okay, before those organizations started to work and collect money in order to organize digs, there were some individuals. Robinson was an American, and he came on his own in 1838, and he discovered this protrusion that you see here on the wall, and he says, well, this must be the beginning of an arch. Later, he was joined by Wilson, and Wilson discovered a second arch that you see in this circle here. And that way today, when you go to the hotel on the right, we know that before you had these big stairs for the people to go to the temple. And all this confirms the writing of Joseph Flavius, who in the 1st century described everything in the Holy Land with great precision. This is Wilson. When you go into the left of the hotel, the beginning of the tunnel, that's where Wilson started to dig. And it's also fascinating what we found there, a huge stone of 40 tons each going on the wall. There was also another individual called Félicien de Saulcy in 1851, who discovered tombs and decided they were the tombs of the kings of Judah. Big commotion around the world. At the end, it was not the kings of Judah, it was a king of Adiaben in Upper Iraq, Queen Helena, who converted to Judaism in the 1st century and was buried there with her family. So it's not, and this place today belongs so far to the French government. Now let's start through the organized digs. We have Charles Warren. Charles Warren made a survey of all the Holy Land, and he worked with a lot of dynamite. He went with shafts in the rock, and he went to dig far, the aim being getting to the layers, to the oldest layers of the ground. He also built a tunnel along the western wall, but he did not go under the Temple Mount. He discovers, among other things, the seal of King Chizkiah and also the pool, which is in the north of the Temple Mount. He also discovered many cisterns, which are in the Temple Mount. After 67, I remember you could see those cisterns. Now it's more difficult to access them, but he gave a good description of the old city. He also went to the sources of the Gihon. As you know, when King David wanted to conquer Jerusalem, he went through the source, which was outside the walls, and through the source he went and conquered the city. And this discovery started a whole interest in biblical archaeology around the world. There were many bestsellers at the time. Babel from the Sands and others, which were extremely popular, and the interest started to spread very much. Then you have here a German Protestant who came to Israel. He was very liked by all the communities, which is very different, and he discovered under his watch this stone was discovered with an inscription. A tunnel was built in 701 to supply water to Jerusalem when you had an army of 180,000 Assyrians around the city. So he closed all the wells around the city and make sure that the supply of water to the city itself was secure. And this stone speak about the two teams being together and meeting and how happy. And this is the inscription. The inscription says basically, this is the story of the tunnel. The axes were against each other. And while 3 cubits were left, the voice of a man called his counterpart, and we were very happy. What's not so much well known, when you enter the Jaffa Gate, and on the right, there's a building called Christ Church, but inside, there's a model of the Temple Mount at the beginning of the 20th century that was built by XIXth, and it's nice to be there. It's not very well visited, but it's interesting to see how it looked at the time. Then come Parker. 1909, Parker came to dig in Jerusalem. Now, Parker started the digging by making a big announcement in British newspaper saying that he's going to discover the treasures of King Solomon. And he started to sell shares, 60,000 shares. That means the equivalent of 2.4 million of today. And the estimation of the treasure of King Solomon was about 200 million. That means $5.7 billion of today. So he had so much money. There's a lot of story about him. Some say he backshifted on the right, backshifted on the left, and he started digging. But when he started digging under the Temple Mount, the Ottomans were very unhappy, and he had to flee. And bye-bye Parker, and bye-bye the investments. McAllister and Duncan started to dig, and what they basically do is clear a little bit of the top of the city of David. Okay. They discovered this tower. They call it the Tower of David, but in fact, it's from the Greek period, the Hasmonean period. King David is still much lower. Those are the pictures. So the top of the city of David was cleared, but I wouldn't say there were big findings with McAllister. Then came Kathleen Kenyon. Kathleen Kenyon is British, and she digged in Jericho and then in the city of David. And she went around the Gihon sources, the water sources, and then started to dig in the city of David, but she introduced something new in archaeology. She was very thorough. She was marking everything, how it was discovered, noting to the millimeter every layer, and starting slowly to excavate. And her method now is simply applied by everybody because that's the way it is. The way you find the artifacts is extremely important, because don't forget, you have stones which were fallen, which have been used by later civilizations of different times, some which are not. And sometimes it's very difficult to make to solve this puzzle because you had 17 times the city was destroyed and rebuilt. So basically you have a 17 stories puzzle to solve. So she started to dig around the city of David. One thing was found. The only thing that was found was the 10th century. This marquise that you see here is from the 10th century. It's a Phoenician style, but otherwise she didn't find anything from the 10th century. Why is the 10th century is important? Because it's the century of King David and King Solomon. Then came 67. In 67, Israel was in Jerusalem, and then archaeology started to work in a very methodic way, systematically. Binyamin Mazar and Yigal Shiloh took care of the south and the southeast of the Temple Mount. Nachman Avigad take the Jewish quarter, that means facing the Kotel, that's where he started to dig. Gabriel Barkai is the southwest of the Temple Mount. Ronnie Reich and Eli Shukron went to the sources, the Gihon sources and the Siloam pool, which we'll see in a moment. And that's where they focused on both parts. Dan Bahat continued the tunnel along the western wall. which we can go visit today. And then Elat Mazar, which is the daughter of Binyamin Mazar, digged in the city of David. And finally, she found 10th century artifacts. Meanwhile, somebody in the picture who didn't dig was Finkelstein. He's a famous archaeologist. And basically he said, well, we didn't discover anything from the 10th century. Therefore, King David is a legend. Maybe he did not exist. Maybe the Bible is all legend. And his book was a bestseller around the world and so on. And the question is, I wrote an article at the time and I said, well, what do we expect to find 10th century from a society which is basically an agrarian society? It's shepherds and farmers. We don't expect to find a coliseum there. So the debate has started, but we'll see that Elat Mazar finally found 10th century constructions and artifacts, and the debate now has changed its direction. So let's start with the south of the temple. Binyamin Mazar on the left, as you can see, and Yigal Shiloh on the right. They did the south part, and they discovered the monumental stairs going there. Along the walls of the Temple Mount, they found the Nomeyyad street from the 8th century. They found the Herodian street from the 1st century, and naturally coil lamps, potteries, and along the stairs you had a lot of mikveh ritual baths along the way, so that when the pilgrims would come, they would wash before going to the temple. What did he find? As you can see here, you have a lot of constructions, a lot of stairs, a lot of rooms on the south. The Kotel is here, okay? And this is Temple Mount, this is Al-Aqsa, this is Dome of the Rock. This is a Herodian street that was found. And everything that we found in Jerusalem, we realize one thing, that Joseph Flavius, who wrote a lot of books of the antiquities of the Jews and so on, was right. Everything he said was extremely precise. Again, this is the southern part of the Temple Mount. It must have looked something like that. And the stairs go directly to the pool of Siloam, which we'll see in a moment. Yigal Shiloh digged in the southeast part of the city, discovered many artifacts, and I remember that he had a lot of trouble with Orthodox Jews who were against the fact that he digged in both places, but didn't want to disturb the burials of people. Nachman Avigad was the one who digged in front of the Kotel. And he started and discovered so many things. Now, don't forget, when he discovered many, many things, he went to the layer of the second temple. Obviously, it was prime real estate. And what he found there is lavish villas, stone basins, pottery, coin, glass vessels, and whatnot. He also found within the old city, identified the Nea Church, which was the biggest church in the antiquity. The Cardo, which are two avenues of columns, which were identified, the wall of Nehemiah from the 13th century, and the tower from the Babylonian period. So in fact, it's extremely rich. It's impossible to go through it now. This is an inscription saying that Emperor Justinian, Byzantine Emperor Justinian, in 6th century, inaugurated or built this Nea Church. And if you read my article on the menorah of the temple, I'm connecting the menorah to the building of that church. This says in Hebrew, Lebet HaTekiah, that's a stone on which somebody near the temple used to blow the shofar, maybe to announce a new month, or maybe the Shabbat or the high holidays. What you see on the right was discovered not by Nachman Avigad, but by a collector who found it. It's a small bell, and we say that the high priest used to have at the bottom of his garment was bells. So when he walks, he would make some noise. It was intentional. This is part of the garment of the high priest, so it also represents something important for religious people. I told you about some lavish villas. This is what you see here. This is what has been found. Okay, we're talking 1st century Roman times. Also found an ossuary saying Yosef ben Kapha. Yosef is of Caiaphas, and we know that Caiaphas was the high priest in the time of Jesus. It's mentioned in the New Testament, so probably his bones are there. And obviously, what you find in Jerusalem is a lot of arrows, a lot of traces of the siege of the city. Nachman Avigadol also found Nehemiah's wall in the Persian time, you know, under Cyrus. The Jews were allowed to come back after and rebuild the second temple. So Nehemiah came and they build a new walls to the city, and this wall has been identified. As it is now, we can reconstruct second temple pretty fairly. And it's absolutely magnificent. You have to think of this picture. You have white marble and gold. And when you come in the morning and you see that Jerusalem is in a cave and you see the light coming from shining in the evening or in the morning, early morning, you see it's something spectacular to the point that many people, I'm not talking about rabbis who said it was unbelievable, even Roman authors said it's the most described city, not only Judea, but in the whole Orient. The whole world was impressed with the beauty of the city. This is the Holy of the Holy. This is a court of the people. Azaraf, the women were here, and sacrifices happen between those two places here. Coins were found by dozens and dozens of coins. For instance, you can see here coins Tiberius. Okay, you can read it Yerushalayim HaKedusha, Holy Jerusalem. You can see here shekel Israel, Israeli shekel. Those are old things, but those coins are from the Hebrew revolt that led to the war against Rome. And the coins on top, this is a coin of Vespasian, and it says Judea Capta. The Romans made a big fuss of the fact that they have captured Judea, which was a tiny country of nothing. But for them, it was a huge victory because it was extremely hard for them. And as you can see here, there's a lady crying, okay? And this Roman soldier standing as a thinker. Gabriel Barkay digged in the southwest of the city of David, and he has found tremendous amount of artifacts. Among other things, one famous artifact he found was simply a small amulet that goes around the neck, and you have there the Birkat Kohanim, the one that we do today, and so on. He found it directly, so it's a good luck charm with the benediction of the priests. Roni Reich and Eli Shukron dug around the Gihon source and tried to reconstruct the city, and they have found also a lot of things. Not only the fortification of the Gihon source, the pool of Siloam, which was at the bottom of the city of David, a water channel that went until the temple, which confirms Joseph's story. Even the road to Jerusalem, the pilgrim road, the roads that go into Jerusalem have been identified, bullet, and you have also Citadel of David, some big stones that were used for the Citadel of David. Also was found the fortification of Chizkiah. Chizkiah is around 701. I told you that the Assyrians destroyed the kingdom of Israel, surrounded Jerusalem, but they could not capture Jerusalem. Jerusalem, as you can see, was full of refugees, and this is a Chizkiah extension because many people came from all Judea and probably from Israel to find shelter within the new fortified city. And this city, which was supplied in water, because you see here this channel in the rock goes like that and goes to the pool of Siloam, and that way they were able to take the water from the source and bring it to the top. And the question is, why do they go in such a tortuous way? Why didn't they go in a straight line? Well, maybe didn't have a compass, but many people think that because there were a few tombs on the side, they didn't want to disturb, and that's why they had this path. This is a famous stone that was found inside the Giron tunnel. And now we know more or less how it was at the time. So when the city was fortified, still the Giron source was quite far. So there was this construction here, you see, that ensures that the source itself stays within the perimeter of the city. Don't forget, here, the slope goes almost 45 degrees at some places. So they needed to build something to secure the water supply. And then if you go down the city of David, you find the pool of Siloam, in Hebrew, Birkat HaShiloach. And we have found, you see the stairs leading to Birkat HaShiloach, they're absolutely monumental. You can go today and you can see the pool. It's quite an impressive pool. And pilgrims used to bath there eventually and go from there to the temple. Danbat dug the tunnel along the temple. Today, everybody can go through this tunnel. You start from the Wilson Arch and you continue north, and you get to the Muslim quarter directly through this tunnel. When the tunnel was inaugurated, there were riots at the time, I remember. And let's go to Israel Finkelstein. Finkelstein, who basically said, you know, King David was a legend and so on, because we didn't find nothing from the 10th century. So maybe he did not exist. And then came one thing. He was right. He was right in one thing. He says, it's impossible that to build a capital on a slope, which is hard to defend when you have a big amount here. So according to him, the city of David should be under the Temple Mount, which makes more sense from a strategic point of view. Okay. But nobody digs under that place, so we don't know. I must say that during this debate in the 90s and the 2000s of Finkelstein, there were American archaeologists, Shanks and Dever. This is also Levy from who studies Philistine artifacts, but those two were trying to say, well, calm down a little bit. Was people try to minimize the Bible to say, you know, the Bible is a fiction. There's a lot of ideology behind the arguments. And in fact, let's look at the things in a more sensible way. And they brought the debate to a more scientific debate, and less, because in Israel, everybody is extreme in its positions. So things have changed as to a few things happened. Number one, in the north of the country was found a stela, and in this there's a tell down inscriptions where it says, well, the house of David. When you say the house of David, that means the king of David and his children and so on. So for the first time, we saw something mentioning King David from the 10th century. Something happened in between. When Israel was conquered, when Jerusalem was conquered in 67, the rabbis, both Sephardic and Ashkenazi, none of them wanted to go on the Holy Temple Mount, because you cannot walk on it, because you don't know where the holies of holies are, and therefore they were absolutely against people going there. So Moshe Dayan says, well, if nobody wants to go there, I'm going to give it to the Waqf. The Waqf is simply the religious organization, and they'll be in charge, and that's it. But the whole idea, I believe that at the time it would have been possible to negotiate, like in Hebron, you know, days for Jews and days for Muslims, or combined or something. but the Waqf took over. But what the Waqf decided to do is to dig with a bulldozer inside the Temple Mount. And there were trucks coming out with thousands of shreds and throwing them. And then Barkai and many other archaeologists started the whole sifting project to go through the ruins and try to find artifacts, and they found thousands of objects. It's unfortunate that this happened that way, but everything was simply smashed by bulldozers and took to a dump. Eilat Mazar changed the whole picture. She excavated the city of David. She found 10th century artifacts, okay? And for once she could say, well, this now that saying that the city of David didn't exist doesn't make sense. She discovered items that you'll see in a moment. She also discovered, by the way, this menorah coin from the 6th century. I'll come back to it a little later. This is where she dug. Jars, a lot of those jars containing wine, sometimes oil. And I believe people used to pay taxes because many of them said la melech, that means for the king, probably it was taxes. And those are 10th centuries. So those are government offices. Bulla were found by dozen, and some of the names we found are names we can identify in the Bible. This is King Hezekiah, end of 8th century. And again, a lot of traces of fights. Then we go to the Persian periods. The Persian periods, we have pieces of tower, pieces of walls here and there, but we also found a lot of coins, okay? Alexander Yanai, the king Alexander Yanai, the Hasmonean king, Yochanan ben Orkanos, Jean Hircan, Antigone, those are Jewish kings, Maccabean kings. We find their coins directly, and then we go to the Roman period. In the Roman period, Jerusalem was built, magnified by Herod, and as we know, it was destroyed in 70. Why am I showing that? Because here, this is simply a parade of in Rome, showing that they have the menorah of the temple. I remember this coin I showed before, Judea Capta. So now the Israeli coin, it's not Judea Capta now, it's Judea Independent, and there's a lady standing proudly with a child, while here's a lady simply crying with her child in her arms. So things, simply it's a way of correcting history. Now, we can stop here and ask questions, or we can continue because now we're entering a second phase. Can we continue? Yeah. No reaction?
I have a comment.
Go on.
David. I read somewhere that it was a Jewish convert to Islam who persuaded the
We didn't get to Islam
Ottoman,
yet. I'll get to Islam, and then maybe after I get to Islam, we'll get to that.
yeah, who
So
persuaded the
let me
Ottoman.
continue. Let
yeah.
me continue, because before the Islam, we still have the Byzantines.
Oh, great.
Okay. All right, we'll get to it. So Byzantine period, remember that the Roman Empire was divided in 4, then in 2. You have the Western Empire, the Eastern Empire, and the Byzantines were ruling in Jerusalem. Then you have the Arabs coming, and you have different dynasties. Then you have the Crusaders periods. Then again, you have an Islamic dynasty and the Ottoman period, follow a British mandate and the State of Israel. We'll go through it slowly. Why am I mentioning the Seljuk dynasty? Because they were only 2 years in Jerusalem, but they left many traces, many madrasas and so on. This map found in Jordan, called the Medaba map, is extremely important because it shows Jerusalem, the 4th, 5th century under Byzantine rule. We can see here the Holy Sepulchre, but we can see also here the Nea Church, which is mega church that I told you before. And you can see those lines of columns that you can see here and there. Those are long alleys, like, main boulevard if you want, and they have been identified. And today you can go between the columns and you have shops in between the columns. That allows us to retrace the Byzantine Jerusalem. Those are the two streets of columns that go there. Okay, the Holy Sepulchre here, the Nia Church is here, and this square here is this rectangle is the Temple Mount. Now, what happened in the around 330, as you know, Constantine, the Emperor Constantine, legalized Christianity, which was so far considered, illegal. And his mother was a devout Christian, and she came to Jerusalem, and she said, "This is a place where Jesus wept. This is the place he was crucified. This is a place for the flagellation and so on." And each place was designated. There was a church that was built there. The church would be sometimes destroyed by the Muslims, sometimes rebuilt by the Crusaders, sometimes destroyed. It's a complicated history, but this is simply the input of Helena, the mother contemporary, was great. And this is the Holy Sepulchre. Look at this picture and this one, 100 years different between those two pictures. This is actual, this is before. I'm going to show you something. You see this ladder here? It's still here. Why? Because the site is shared among many churches: Greek Orthodox, Roman Catholic, Armenian, Coptic, Syriac, Ethiopian, and so on, and they fight to each other, and sometimes they really kill each other. Many times the police have to separate among them, because who's going to be in charge of that pole of the shrine? They used to go to the Ottomans and, cover the Ottomans with gold to be simply the owner of that pole in the church. And at the end of the year, the Ottoman says, "Okay, now we open the bid again." So it was a very, very complicated history, and the churches never agreed among themselves, and many times there are physical fights among the people in charge. This is the sepulchre during Christmas, I believe, and this is the anointing store where Jesus' body was put. And we get to the Persian period. The Persian evicted the Byzantium for a while, and in fact, Jews helped the Persians, and Judea was independent for 3 years. This is not well known, but for 3 years, Judea was under Jewish rule. So the struggle was there, but the Persians at the end, they lost, and Byzance came back. And in fact, the Byzance and Persia were fighting for so many centuries, they were exhausted. And this, what would permit the Arabs to go very easily and to flood the Middle East with their armies. This is a coin I told you about, and he's probably from that period, from the Persian period. Now, the Arabs came, and as you know, the first caliphs were from Arabia, then the Caliph of Damascus were not, but they wanted to mark their imprint on history. They're not from Mecca or Medina, and they built this Dome of the Rock. As you can see, the style here is not Arabic style. The style is simply Byzantine. While the Arabs and Byzantine people were fighting each other, the Arabs invited Byzantine architects to build this place. So business is business, war no war. And this is Al-Aqsa. Supposedly, Muhammad from there went to the sky. And this is, in fact, this is the holiest place of for the Muslim. Less so the Dome of the Rock. And today it's used as a big mosque So let me go back. This is Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is the Dome of the Rock. This is the Western Wall. This is the Wilson Arch and the tunnel that goes there. This is the Robinson Arch that we know was here. This is the south where you had the stairs, magnificent stairs going down the wall, and then you go up to the Shiloah Pool. And the Jewish quarter is here. It's not shown here, but you have to imagine. And on the north here, we have a lot of churches with the Via Dolorosa. That means a place where Jesus was carrying his cross before the crucifixion. The Crusaders came, more or less a century. Crusaders came. There was, in fact, the reason the Crusaders came, one of the Fatimid caliphs from Egypt decided to forbid to destroy churches and destroy synagogues and also the cats from somehow to kill all the cats. It's the Caliph Hakim. And that one was one of the reasons that since the pilgrims could not come to Jerusalem, that was one of the reasons that the crusades started. And you had many crusades, okay? Supposedly going to Jerusalem, but you can see some crusades, take Venetian crusades here, it ended up in Constantinople. Constantinople was so rich, was so big, was so powerful that people decided to take over Constantinople and forget about Jerusalem. So the efforts of the Crusaders were scattered. And you can see here there were a few counties of Edessa, Antioch, county of Tripoli, and the kingdom of Jerusalem. During the Crusader times, many churches were built, many Byzantine places were renovated, and also the Temple Mount became a church at the time, and Al-Aqsa became the place for, they call it the Stable of Solomon, because the place is given to the Templars. At that period, that's 12th century, that's where the Armenian church was built. The Armenian church, when you go from Jaffa Gate to the Western Wall, you go along the Armenian quarter. And we found a lot of artifacts from the Crusades period. Baldwin, on the right, this is Templars symbol. You see the mosque, the Dome of the Rock with the cross on top, okay? And all those says, you know, Christ is the Lord, kind of the coins that are there. And then Crusaders are beaten with Salah ad-Din, this Kurdish that succeeded defeating the Crusaders. Crusaders somehow were divided, badly led. They lost the Holy Land. And during the centuries, each dynasty, you had the Ayyubid, which is children of Salah ad-Din, which led Wehrmacht. Then you had after that before you had the Fatimid, you had the Ayyubid. Then you had the others coming. You will see in a moment which, and each one is this mark in Jerusalem. Suleiman the Magnificent, well, he built the walls around Jerusalem. Now he had the name Suleiman, that means Solomon, and he wanted to let it mark, and the walls that you see here around Jerusalem, the old city, are from his time. He conquered the sea in 1515, the walls were from 1345. Now around the walls of Jerusalem, you had many places. The Mount of Olives is extremely important. It has thousands and thousands of tombs. Many Jews during centuries, Jews used to go to die to get buried here because, according to the prophets, in Emek Yehoshaphat, that's where the rebirth of that's when the resuscitation of the dead will happen. They come and enter through Emek Yehoshaphat. They wanted ready for the action. That's why you have here a lot of tombs. And you have also tombs here from the Hasmonean period and from the Roman period. You also have synagogues. This is the Hurva synagogue, 17th century. In fact, the story goes much before 12th century, but it was in a different place. But what you have here, and this during Jordanian time, as you can see, it was completely neglected. almost destroyed, and it has been rebuilt. Today, it is used. You had at the time 4 synagogues. You had the Istanbuli synagogue, you had Benzakai synagogue, which this is the old one. It has been rebuilt also here. And you have also the Eliyahu Hanavi synagogue and more. So those synagogues existed. They were destroyed after 48, and they were rebuilt after 67. And you have the Western Wall. That was a place of worship, and the whole esplanade has been cleared to allow the people to come. And what you see here is the crowd during Birkat Kohanim, the blessings of the priests. I'll ask you just 1 second. I think I have a tape to show you. This is in Jerusalem during the blessing of the priests. I need the sound because the sound is impressive. Okay. It is quite impressive being there. I'll go back to my presentation. Then you have the Tower of David, where this is supposed to be the tomb of David. And on top of it, there is the place called La Seine. That's where the Last Supper of Christ happened. So obviously, it is an important place of worship for the Christians and for the Jews. There were rumors at the time that the Vatican proposed to exchange the synagogue in Toledo, which has been transformed into church, to put it back to become a synagogue, and that Israel will leave the Tower of David to the Vatican. And obviously, this didn't go through, but it was floating in the air. And then you have many, many, many churches, because you have many denominations. And through 19th century, there was a craze in the whole world. Every nation wanted to have its church in Jerusalem. So this is a Lutheran church, Redeemer, not far from the Holy Sepulchre. This is the Church of Flagellation. It was built by the Crusaders. That's the place where Jesus was flogged, what the tradition says. South of Mount Zion, in the southwest of the Temple Mount, you have l'Église de Dormition Abbey. That's where Mary had her last sleep before she died. This is inside. You have the Church of All Nations. In fact, if you go there, you see the work Our Father in Heaven written in all the languages possible. You have the Russian church. This is St. Mary's Church outside the walls. And if you go on Rehov Yafo, Jaffa Street in Jerusalem, there's also the Trinity Church, okay, which is there. So the Russians also, in the second part of the 19th century, wanted to have their part in Jerusalem. During the British Mandate, the British didn't leave much. There's the Rockefeller Museum, but it was built by an American mostly. This is the YMCA, which was also built by an American. So this is what's left on the British Mandate. There's very few buildings or traces of the British. in 67, Six-Day War, and Israel found itself, and then started the whole archaeology took another dimension, more professional, more organized, less, how to say, less adventurous, but really well organized. And what's in the future is going to be probably we'll have the hotel will stay, and you'll be able to travel through history under different sites, Olmeyads, Crusaders, Second Temple, and more and more and more. The project is complicated, but this is one of the pictures that is being plotted. No, I didn't say nothing about the doors of Jerusalem, but each door has a history. Okay, this is a Zion Gate, this is a Dung Gate, this is a Jaffa Gate, this is Hulda Gate, which is in the south of the Temple Mount. This is the Lion Gate. You can see the lions here. Those are lions. Damascus Gate, and so on. So all this is there. This is the new gate, and each gate has a lot of history. In fact, it's possible to give a whole sequence here on the gates, the history of the gates. And the New Jerusalem, you have the Knesset, which was built in the 60s, early 60s. You have near the Knesset, the menorah offered by the British government, and the menorah, you have the history of the Jewish people engraved. And you have the Shrine of the Book in Israel Museum. Another place, you have Chagall windows in the Hadassah Hospital. And that's it. And Jerusalem is still the focus of the whole world, of many nations. Still, from all the religion, everybody has a soft spot on Jerusalem. With that, I finish, and I'm ready for questions.
Can't hear the clapping, but everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Pleasure.
That was a great presentation. You took us through the history of Jerusalem and until now, and we saw things familiar to us, and we saw things that are not familiar. And as usual, we learn a lot from your beautiful presentation. Thank you so much. We